In Bygone Dreams, you play as Wynne, and alongside your talking arm, you'll be going on an adventure through the dreamland of Loom to try and see what is real and what is dreamland and high fantasy. And this sets the bar for one of the most esoterically designed but totally fascinating action adventure RPGs that I've played in quite some time. If you enjoy your Souls-like style games, this might be one for you. But it's one of those games that doesn't put its best foot forward early on and gets better and better the further you get into it. So you might just have a bumpy first hour, but stick with it. It gets better, like they always say in the adverts. It really does with Bygone Dreams. I'm going to split up my review into themes to try and keep it as succinct as possible, because this is one of those games where I could talk about it for a very long time and that will bore everyone to death. So I'm going to start off with theme 1, which is the visual art style and aesthetic. Bygone Dreams has lots of different environments that are heavily stylised and have a lot of detail in them in ways that you don't expect. They're beautifully patterned. They've got interesting lore-based designs that hints at a really rich world that Loom has. And because they are interesting spins on either real world environments or it's real world with a bit of fantasy stretched into it, it feels imaginative and playful and inviting. And that's often backed up by a comedic, slightly clumsy soundtrack. But I mean clumsy in a positive fashion, because it's like pizzicati strings kind of doing weird things and being curious and almost like Alice in Wonderland but on steroids and with lots of enemies trying to kill you. This then lays the foundations for the characters that are inside this world, theme 2, which are fully bodied in a way that each world has its own boss and character that kind of embodies that world. They'll often have voice acted scenes, but not all of them will be voice acted. But that then carries through into the way how you'll then usually have to defeat them as a boss. Each boss is multifaceted, goes through multiple phases and has lots of different styles of attack. And just like you as a character, they have stamina as well as health. And you can choose whether you want to wear them down stamina-wise so that they can then have like a period of not being able to attack you, so that you can then go all in with your attacks, or you can just try and chip away at their health and survive and dodge around the various attacks that they'll throw at you. Boss battles take place in big arenas, but there's a lot of geography in those arenas that mean that quite often you're trying to either get away from the melee attacks or working out when to switch from a ranged version so that you can use your bow and arrow versus any of your melee attacks, because the enemy will be switching between the two as well and then charging up their stamina to then do absolutely huge attacks as their health goes down. Bosses really felt challenging but also quite dynamic, and it was one of the big plus points for me for Bygone Dreams. But you have to enjoy picking your moments to attack and knowing what type of weapon to choose to attack with, because you as a character, as we move into the next theme, have a multitude of weapons at your disposal and they're not all created equal. Firstly, you'll have melee attack, and you'll start off with a kind of staff, then you'll have like arm cleaves, and then you'll have almost like a spiked ball to then like smash down on. There's loads of different ones that you can pick up, and they all have different elements to them, and then you can add on attachments that give them, say, like fire or ice damage or earth damage or nature damage or light and dark damage. So all the RPG-ness of elemental stuff are here, but you won't get to that until really the second half of the game. Alongside this, you'll also have a bow and arrow, which consumes mana but can be really helpful for keeping you at a distance so that you can show some shots in and then roll out of the way, because when you're rolling, usually you're invincible and can get out of the way of some of the attacks that are coming absolutely flying in that you might not be able to avoid unless you do the dodge roll. Everything has a lead-in animation to it though, and this quite often is also part of your choice, because you'll have a light attack and a heavy attack for each of those melee weapons, but even those aren't created equally, because some of the melee attacks go faster and chain up quicker, but might not be able to ultimately do enough stamina damage versus HP damage to like really knacker out your enemies. So you have to really play around with what works well for A, your play style, but B, what enemies you're dealing with at that time, because you'll want to dive into the menu and swap it out so that you're best equipped for whatever it is that you're going up against. When it comes to just basic enemies and attacks, Bygone Dreams, because of all of that lead-in animation and the fact that you need to kind of roll around a little bit and then choose exactly when you're going to go in with your attack once the enemy's kind of knackered itself or is going through its own animation phase. Sometimes Bygone Dreams feels really quite slow and stodgy, but the speed does increase the further you get into the game, because your character gets upgraded alongside the weapons too, and whenever you kill certain bosses, they then reappear in your central hub called the Tranquil Gardens, and they'll start offering upgrades, and that can upgrade your speed, your damage, the way how you chain things together. You can have pets that come along for your ride and they'll augment you as well. And so you start to move from feeling like, God, this is a bit sluggish and a bit slow and really quite imprecise, to starting to feel like Bygone Dreams then becomes, it never turns into like an action arcade style setting, but you get much more into a flow of things the further you get into the game, which then makes it much more satisfying when you start to trigger different combos. And there's like wooden turrets in a forest that start doing like laser beams at you, and you're busy dodging that whilst then taking out a weird forest clown. Like, it all just flows really well. And the second half of the game, like, is 3 times better than the first time parts of the game, where things don't really flow nearly as nicely. That said, Bygone Dreams does have some really weird quirks to its design that will not be for everyone, and some of them definitely weren't for me. The fact that you have to wait for like dissolving animations from enemies to then pick up any of their loot makes the game feel slow and sluggish. And the fact that you have to go and manually pick everything up, and that has its own animation too, just slows things down. There's also something of an impreciseness about some of your melee weapons, and so you might want to go and smash some pottery so that you can collect some of the things that are inside it. And you'll do a swipe right in front of it, but it misses, and you think, hang on, I've just gone through it. And then you'll do it a few times and eventually something will connect, and you think, well, why was that different this time around? I don't understand why. It's just Bygone Dreams being Bygone Dreams, and you get used to that very quickly over time. Similarly, whenever you're going around picking up different herbs and fruit and things off the ground to then create your potions and any other upgrades that you want in your ovens that are dotted around the game, that also comes with long, arduous animations, and because you might be stuck doing that whilst then an enemy appears and causes carnage, sometimes that catches you out. And what it also does quite often is get you stuck in the environment. And this happened to me repeatedly throughout my gameplay of Bygone Dreams. Getting stuck in walls, stuck in floors, stuck in positions that I couldn't then get myself out of, because there is no jump button in Bygone Dreams. You are walking everywhere. And so if you can't walk up some flight of stairs or up a ramp and you end up in some kind of jagged, you are stuck. So quite often you'll have to kind of exit out, repeat back in, go again. My last critique is probably an issue of 2 other game design choices combining together that meant that I had to restart this game twice, losing about 5 hours of gameplay across the 2 times. And this is, as you move around but also do consumables, take potions, replenish your mana, whatever it is that you're doing, the game autosaves. but sometimes it will autosave and then respawn you in places that you then can't get out of again, which then means that you're stuck and broken. And sometimes that also means that you might be mid-quest and you've completed one part of the quest, and then it will spawn you in a place that means it's incredibly difficult, if not nigh on impossible, to get back and do the other part of the quest, because the game doesn't signpost you anywhere. There's no map, and whilst it's not open world, it's not strictly full-on corridors either. There's kind of different ways for you to get from A to B to C. And in theory, that kind of implies that you can do BAC or CAB or CBA, whatever it is, you should be able to complete all of those things to then complete a mission and move on. But the game doesn't always seem to agree. And so what it will do is when it saves and then you've either died or you quit out and then respawn back in again, it just goes, no. And it utterly ruins your save. And that happened to me twice. And it was deeply frustrating and really put a bit of a stain on what is actually a quite esoteric, oddly designed in places, but really engrossing world and experience. I think fans of Souls-like games will enjoy this. You'll need to have a bit of patience for bugs, and you'll need to get past some of the really weird lack of quality of life for like picking up things, managing inventory, allocating stuff to your quick access items, all of this kind of stuff. Menu systems, they're really poorly designed and have quite often the longest route for you to be able to get to something. And there's a lot of visual flair, but it's not always very usable. However, what this game absolutely does have in spades is character. And sometimes I'll take character over straight up usability time and time again, because this offers something that feels different. And in an age of cookie cutter Souls-likes that are out there, there's a lot to be said for doing something different. And from that perspective, I give Bygone Dreams a recommendation. Just know going in, it's rough around the edges, particularly when it comes to game-breaking bugs.